it's Wendy Capewell, your relationship specialist. And today I'm going to be interviewing Pamela Windle, who's an experienced women's health coach. So, hello, Pamela. I really like to introduce you. So Pamela Windle is my guest today, and she is an experienced women's health coach who's passionate about transforming women's lives as they unfold their unique hormonal journey. And we know how tricky that one can be, don't we? And she's also very strongly believes that perimenopause, menopause and beyond don't need to be debilitating. Because I think that's it. I've been through it and I know what it can be like. And I didn't get any help at all. Somebody to help me through that will be just awesome. Introduce yourself, Pamela, and please, I want to hear all about it because I'm sure lots of women are going to relate to this one.
Yes, indeed they will. Even if they're not there yet, it's there for us all really, whether you've gone through it and you're the other side of it, or whether you're in the middle of it, or whether you've not even arrived at that point yet. Thank you, Wendy. It's really, really good to be here.
Yeah, and I think it's really important because I think so many women feel that it's almost the end of their lives and they see it as a negative and they don't know how to get through it either. They just thinking about those hot sweats and maybe all those horrible feelings when you're either flooding during a period or they're sporadic or not sure what's going on, and of course the mood swings as well. I mean, all of that, and there's much more to it, but they just see it as something very negative and happening to them rather than being able to feel that they can take some control. So I think it's amazing to kind of feel that we can take control of that situation.
Absolutely. And, partly because of what we've been told through society and through generations of women, how awful it is. And I know, having worked with many clients, that we can take control and we can have a positive transition to being postmenopause, definitely.
So Pamela, before we start, perhaps you could tell us a bit more about you and how you got into what you're doing.
Yeah, so obviously I'm Pamela. I'm based in Nottingham and I've lived in Nottingham all my life. And I'm of that third age woman age. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm of that age. I'm 51. And my background is that I have been a health coach. I've been a health coach, personal trainer, fitness instructor for many, many years, sort of. I think it's 20 years, I think it is now. So that's my background, sort of health and fitness. And then I decided that I was going to go to university at the age of 41 because, because I really enjoyed being a personal trainer, but I really felt in terms of helping my clients in a much bigger way, we had to then work with the mind as well. So I did a combined degree, which is psychology with sports science, which was really, really good. And I think it was in my third year in one of my modules, we did motivational interviewing technique. There was a module on it. And I remember thinking, oh, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to work with behavioural changes in a clinical setting. And once I graduated, I then got a job within the NHS and I worked with dependent drinkers. It was actually perfect, my degree, in terms of the psychology side of it. And then I fell out of love with that. I didn't really enjoy being employed, having not been employed for many years, being a personal trainer, or working for yourself. And then I trained as a hypnotherapist and a bit of psychotherapy as well, combined diploma. And then it was 2014 and my dad had passed away and was spending quite a lot of time with my sisters. My sister is 4 years older than me, my older sister. And we were organising Dad's funeral. It was in the summer. And she just started having these really, really bad outbreaks of sweating. And then we thought, oh my God, it's your hormones, it's the menopause or perimenopause. And I was thinking, oh my God, right, seriously, are we really that age that it's actually going to happen to me? I'm only 4 years, down the line from you.
Yeah.
And I started reading about it. And what I started to read was something that I'd never heard of before. No one's ever told me. Actually, we can take control. And a lot of the symptoms that a lot of women get is related to their bodies just not functioning as well, their liver not functioning as well, their digestive tract not functioning as well. And that's where the hot sweats, the anxiety, the depression, the heavy bleeding, the low libido, all of that is contributed because of these other things that women didn't know about. So that kind of got me thinking, oh, right, so that means I can prepare for being perimenopausal. And, just how networks go, online, I was invited
Yeah.
into a group called Third Age Woman, and realized actually I could take a qualification in this, and it's kind of a higher qualification for somebody like myself who's got a personal training background.
Right.
And so I did this online training as a third aid practitioner, and then a year later I then qualified in women's health coaching, and that kind of really is the umbrella about everything what I do, really, but it seals it all together because coaching, and then we go into other things like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and all the things that relate to women's health. And so the third aid practitioner, what that is that I can work with women through all stages of perimenopause, menopause, and beyond, because our hormones are still important once we get to postmenopause as well. So it doesn't just stop there.
Right. You see, I thought mine had just upped and left me now.
No, you still have hormones, and we still need to look after them postmenopause as well. It's really important to do that as well.
I think we're getting more information now, but I think women still feel that they've just got to put up with it and go through it, and there's nothing they can do. That's a shame, isn't it? Because they just feel that their life is virtually over. And that's really sad. I think it's fascinating because we've always got hormones, but they really come into play in that adolescent stage. And then that's when it all kicks off for us women, that's for sure. And then, of course, we struggle with them or deal with them, I should say, cope with them all through our lives, and especially through our reproductive lives. But when do they start really changing?
Yeah, I mean, scientifically, there is an age where they do start to change. Obviously, it depends on you as a woman and how you've lived your life before you get to that stage, whether you've been burning the candle at both ends, whether you've drank a lot of alcohol, whether you've smoked, whether you've struggled with depression and anxiety, also whether you've been on medication. All of those things has an impact on our hormones. And scientifically, the age is 35. That is when we scientifically move into that perimenopausal stage or premenopausal stage. As
Right.
progesterone starts to decline, that's when, scientifically, that's where they say it actually happens. But I could say it depends on you and your genetics as well. We're all different.
Right.
But when a woman starts to feel the changes, the big changes, when she starts to have significant changes in her menstrual cycle, that generally is perimenopause. So it's a bit before we get to menopause. And that can last, anything from 5 years to 15 years, depending on her. Yeah, so it's, there isn't one answer at all, it is an individual thing.
And I get that. I mean, there are some women that go through it a lot younger than others. And you were talking about medication and treatment. And for me, because I had breast cancer at the age of 46, then the chemotherapy just stopped my periods dead, and I think I immediately went into, into the menopause. That really affected it. So I hear what you're saying. I did say that was one of the benefits, if you like, of having chemotherapy. I didn't have to go through the problems with the periods and so on that some women do struggle with. But yeah, certainly set it off for me. So it's quite interesting how so many things can affect us. I mean, that's quite a dramatic one, is chemotherapy, but equally, as you say, smoking and the drinking and not taking care of ourselves can have such a huge effect on us.
Yeah, it can. And that's a fact. I guess yours would be an early menopause. Anybody that stops having a period if they're younger than 45, that's classed as early menopause.
Right.
So that's a different circumstances. And there's a lot of shame, isn't there, as well, about being menopausal or post-menopause from men and society, and even females as well.
Yeah, and I think the one thing for me was having those hot flashes, because it just felt so embarrassing, and I really felt it. So that if anyone drew my attention to it, it made it worse because I felt more
Mm.
embarrassed. They know what's happening to me, and this is an embarrassing situation, and I can really still remember that shame of anyone drawing attention to it. It just felt horrid. And I think
Yeah.
you're right. We don't bring it out into the open, do we? We don't see it as just part of our lives. It's
Yeah, it is really sad because it is another phase in a woman's life. There's no shame in puberty, and there's no shame in, being pregnant, and
mm,
it's just another phase in a woman's life. There's no shame in it. In other parts of the world, women are held up in high esteem, and they're seen as a wise woman. It's just in our Western culture, women who reach that point in life are, not as valued as a woman that is fertile, which is sad, isn't it?
yeah. It's very sad, as you say. Being pregnant is something joyful. There are huge parts of our lives that are not seen as being acceptable, even having periods, and maybe if you have painful periods or there's an accident or something, we still feel that great shame. For example, in Nepal, I know that in rural areas, women are still sent out of the house to live with the animals because they're not allowed in the house. They're not accepted in the household. They can't eat with the rest of the family. And that's a really horrid thing to do to
Mm,
any woman. So I think
mm,
that whole situation it's not pleasant, is it? We shouldn't have this. We
no.
give birth. Yes, of course, men. We can't do it without men. We can't do it without being impregnated. We can't do it. We co-create that life, but equally we carry that child within us. So we play a huge part in that reproduction system, and yet we're almost denigrated in situations. So when you're talking about perimenopause and menopause, you touched on it, but can you explain it a bit more as well? Because that's a kind of phrase that's become much more, if you like, in our language, which didn't exist years ago.
It is, and even some GPs don't recognise that there's different phases of that transition. So perimenopause is where you start to see the obvious signs of change to your cycle. So you might start to miss your period, so not have one every month, so your cycle's getting longer, or you might start to have those hot sweats, but only a certain time of the month. So they're not there all the time. It's when basically you're not ovulating anymore, or your ovulation doesn't happen every month, because on day 13, 14 of your cycle, we're meant to reach ovulation. So if you don't have enough estrogen, then that's not going to happen. You're not going to produce progesterone, which is the other hormone that happens, which is sort of dominant hormone, the other side of ovulation. So it's when your progesterone levels are starting to taper off even more than you were when you were 35, for instance, say you're 45, so you've had 10 years of that pre-menopausal stage, you're 45, your progesterone's decreasing even more so, and so is your estrogen, and that's where you get the fluctuations in mood, the hot sweats, maybe heavy period as well, flooding, and then you start to skip cycles as well. And so that is perimenopause. But some women don't experience that. Some women, just like you, stop having a period straight away. And I think maybe some of the signs are so very slight that maybe they didn't read them, they didn't notice them. So it could be like anything from worsened PMS. So, you might feel a bit more agitated around your period than you did 10 years ago. So that's perimenopause. And then we transition into menopause. And menopause, if you're above the age of 45, so it's a normal stage of life rather than early menopause, is the bit where you transition from perimenopause to not having a period then, and you're a menopausal only for 12 months. And a lot of people get confused. They think that the perimenopausal bit, where you're having these really crazy hot sweats and heavy bleeding, is menopause, and it's not. That is perimenopause. And menopause is 12 months after your very last period. And obviously, we don't know when that last period is going to be, so we don't know how long that happens. But you have to be 12 months free of a period at all. And that is your menopausal bit. Once you get to 12 months, that is where you are technically then classed as post-menopause. And then we remain post-menopause for the rest of our lives, which could be 40, 50 years.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I wasn't aware of that at all. That's interesting. I always thought you're menopausal, that was it. And going through the change as it used to be put, which is, and whispered as well. She's going through the change. So, thank you for clarifying that. It's really interesting, because I can remember talking to my aunt actually and saying, well, how long does the menopause last? I'm thinking that it will be a very short time. And she said, oh, it could go on for years. And I looked at her in horror and I said, why? I can't believe this. And she said, well, think about it. When you go through adolescence, that takes a long time. So you're to reverse the whole situation is also going to take a long time. And then it clicked. It's really interesting that you've made those two differences, or even the three stages, much clearer.
Yeah. Adolescence actually can last for women up until the age of 18 and boys 19. And so a lot of people don't realise that, especially if you're putting a young girl on the pill at age 14 because she's having outbreaks of spots, and she's still an adolescent, the hormones are still working themselves out. So, that really angers me actually, because that is really bad for a young girl. There's obviously a reason why hormones are causing the spots, and to suppress them by giving her the pill is really harmful. And so she's 18 years old, or she's 28, and she's been on the pill for over a decade, possibly.
Yeah, and I think there's just not enough knowledge, and GPs, they're very specialised in what they do. They know in certain areas, but they're called general practitioners for a reason. So, yeah, I think they just don't understand it any more than they understand what I do either. So, the emotional side. We have a battle on our hands at times.
Yes.
So what happens if you don't understand your hormones about the menopause? What happens if you just don't get it? Well, I know that I just battle through it, but I mean, what happens to us?
That's the risk, really, because I feel if you don't understand your hormones, before you know it, you're whipped up into this massive chaos. You don't recognize your body anymore. You look in the mirror and it's not who you thought you were. You're acting differently. Nobody recognizes you as a person, in terms of your personality. And that's the risk of not understanding your hormones and not paying attention to those little warning signs that happen, and they might happen a decade ago. So it might happen at age 35, for instance. And as you've got older, they've just got louder and louder. And so what I teach my clients, or I encourage my clients to do, is really pay attention to that little voice, that that inner voice that's talking to you and saying something isn't quite right. This month I didn't sleep very well. Why didn't I sleep very well? It could be my hormones, because our hormones help us sleep. And so our hormones are testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone, and they all have to be in harmony for us to feel balanced. And so if one is out of balance, so are the rest of them, including our thyroid as well. And a lot of people don't relate the thyroid to the rest of the hormones, but it is in the same family. And so they have specific reasons why they need to be in balance. Progesterone helps us sleep, helps us maintain healthy mood. So if you're having worsened PMS symptoms, just around as you're ready to start your period, well, that's an indication that your progesterone is a little bit low. So we can do something about that. If you're not sleeping very well in that last end of your cycle, again, it could be progesterone being too low as well.
Right.
If your periods are heavy, again, that could be your progesterone is too low and your estrogen is too high. So there's really telltale signs of what's happening. Your symptoms is a telltale sign of what's actually physically going on internally. And I think if women grasp that, then I think that would just really help them to not be that woman at 51 that's just completely chaos and she can't cope, and she goes to a doctor and says, I can't cope, I'm not sleeping, I'm gaining all this weight, my relationship is failing, I don't get on with the people at work, what can you do to help me? I don't want to go on HRT, and the doctor goes, or he goes, leaflet, here's, start exercising, avoid coffee and alcohol. Yeah, they're all good, but if she knew what was happening 5 years before that would save all of that.
So you can actually help women with those situations and readjust the hormones. That's
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's got to be good, because as you say, all that GPs offer really is HRT. I wasn't allowed it because of the cancer, but even so, I didn't want to have it. There was something that, I suppose because I'd been bombarded with all that medication, and gosh, it saved my life, I'm not grumbling, but I'd rather not have to have medication unless I have to. But if you can help that, I mean, that's awesome, because a lot of women don't want to take HRT, but they also, or they're not able to, but they also don't know how that they can cope and reduce their symptoms.
Yeah, it's like there's not an alternative, is there? There's HRT, and I think there's another drug they can prescribe to help with the hot sweats. And they also prescribe antidepressants as well sometimes for women. And the natural side, there's so much varied information on the internet. Try this, try that, try this supplement, that supplement, and there isn't just one thing that works. There is, obviously we want to go down the medical route, but if you don't, it's just a combination of lots of things.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's so lovely to hear that there is help out there. And I wanted to lead on because you touched on the fact of they feel that their relationship's failing. I think so many women, they just feel that their sex life is over, and that isn't good for either partner, because all right, kind of when you're not feeling great, you don't tend to want to have sex, but if that happens and your relationship drifts apart, that's really sad, because that should be a time when you can really say, you know what, we don't have to worry about contraception. We don't have to have all those worries and concerns that we had when we were younger. And probably the kids have left home as well. I mean, that's a great time to reconnect in a different way, isn't it? Because there's a sense of freedom. But so many women that I talk to, especially, oh no, we don't. Even men say, oh no, we don't anymore. And that's a really sad thing, because I'm sure, you're the expert. Surely our sex life is really important to us.
It really is important to us. It really is. The hormone testosterone is linked to our sex drive, and so is oxytocin, that loving connection. And the oxytocin does decrease once we do transition into postmenopause. So once estrogen isn't as strong as it used to be,
Right.
oxytocin does decrease, and so does testosterone decrease with age
Mm.
again when we get to that postmenopause stage. But we still have those hormones and they're still available to us. Now, and I think the women you're talking to and the men possibly, their sex drive is obviously non-existent, which kind of says
Mm.
that there's an hormonal imbalance. That's the reason why. So just because you are postmenopause or just because you're a certain age, it doesn't mean that you can't have a sex drive. If they've accepted that they don't want one, it's probably because of their hormones aren't the right level. The hormones are out of balance, which is then switching off that sex hormone. And therefore, they've just become used to not having those desires there. Then they get used to a pattern of not having intimacy in that way. And before you know it, they don't want it anyway. But actually, it's a hormone imbalance. You can have a healthy sex life till you hit the grave. You can absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's so important for women to have orgasms regularly.
Right.
Scientifically, it's proven that actually there's only two real ways for a woman to actually feel calm and peaceful. One
Okay.
is through meditation,
Yeah.
and the other is after an orgasm. So having an orgasm is great for our wellness, for our well-being as
Yeah.
women. Really important. And also, the vagina as well. If you don't use it, you lose it as well.
Yeah.
And I know that vaginal atrophy or thinning of the vaginal tissue is a problem for some women as well.
Mm.
Again, it's something that you can try to avoid happening. And even if it does happen, there's things that you can do to not make it as bad as it possibly is. But yeah, having a sexual desire is hormonal imbalance, definitely. And it's not,
Yeah.
I don't think it's a decision that they're making consciously. It's a subconscious decision because of the lack of the hormones that's sparking that.
Yeah. And I guess if there is a hormonal balance, but then if you then almost give into it or allow it, then it's going to reduce even more. So
Absolutely.
therefore, yeah, I mean, it's just a vicious cycle, isn't it? I think there is something very valid, as you say. I mean, about keeping our bodies healthy. And if it's much nicer actually to have an orgasm, feel that peaceful, calmness about us. Meditation's great, but it's not quite as pleasurable, is it?
No, no, there's more reasons to have an orgasm, and it's looking after your well-being. Because
Absolutely. And just being connected to another human being is just so special. There's nothing nicer than having that real sense of those levels of oxytocin. I mean, I really recognize it and have done since I was a child. I could feel the oxytocin flooding through my body when I got that connection with another human being. I didn't know what it was, but now I do. And it was, wow, that was my oxytocin. It was really working. And yeah, I mean, c- connection with another human being keeps us healthy, and we do need
absolutely,
that, don't we? It's really
yeah,
important for us. So yeah, I guess we want to move on a bit more now. Kind of, how do we do this? How do we empower ourselves to have that healthy life? How do we educate ourselves? How do we educate our partners? I mean, men certainly. If we haven't got an idea about it, how on earth are our partners or men going to know about it? How are we going to teach our children? this is so important. I even hear women, mothers, not being able to talk to their children about procreation, about having sex, about the emotional side of that. And that is, if they could only just about tell them about periods and um, the kind of very basics. Well, when we get onto the rest of it, everybody's lost unless we start talking to each other about it.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, I think, I don't know, it should be taught in school, this sort of stuff. And obviously, it wasn't taught when I was at school. And I remember trying to learn it myself younger, in my younger years, having a look at how my cycle works. And it just felt confusing. What is that? Oh, okay, that's estrogen and this hormone and this hormone. It just felt really confusing. And I think for women, sort of my generation and maybe your generation as well, they just didn't know. And because we didn't know, it wasn't important. And younger women too still don't know either. And therefore, the younger generation aren't going to know either. But it needs to change, because when we start to pay attention to our hormones, this is when we can transition to that postmenopause, and we don't have all these debilitating symptoms, and we have healthy relationships with our partners, and we want to have a sex life with our partners for years to come. Because what should happen once our ovaries stop producing those hormones, Mother Nature is so clever, and it's created another way for us to produce those hormones, and that's our adrenal glands. And our adrenal glands sit on top of our kidneys, the little glands either side, and they produce our sex hormones when we get to postmenopause. They produce it while we're still fertile,
Okay.
but the main source is our ovaries. So once our ovaries stop working, they don't stop working altogether, actually. They still work, but they don't produce hormones like they were.
Yeah.
And so the adrenal glands is the backup. So that's Mother Nature. Okay, well, look, she still has these hormones. They're going to be slightly different, not as strong, but they're still there, and they're in our adrenal glands. And so, what you said earlier about my hormones have long gone. Well, a lot of people do think that. And I've even heard someone say, oh, all what we're left with is male hormones. We're only left with testosterone. I heard that once. And so there's all these things that,
They're myths, aren't they?
yeah.
Complete myths. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That, a lot of women hear and actually take that on board and believe it. And so our adrenal glands produces our hormones once we get to postmenopause. But the thing with our adrenal glands is that they also produce cortisol. And so if we're stressed constantly,
Yeah.
then
It blocks the other hormone.
yes, it
Yeah.
stops producing those sex hormones. So that's when you get somebody that's got a hormone imbalance because they've got no testosterone, because their body in a state of stress continuously. Therefore, it thinks it's in danger. Well, who's going to lay down and have sex when you're in danger? You're going to be defending yourself or running away, aren't you, from that bear that's chasing you?
Yeah.
So that's Mother Nature. So being perimenopause is actually stressful. Those hormonal changes is stressful for a woman. But it's managing that stress. And so the stress can start much earlier on in life, obviously with life stresses, and, just the way we live our life, if you're not sleeping well, depression, things like that. And so that when you do get to postmenopause, your adrenal glands are so depleted of all that good stuff because it's so used to producing cortisol. It's like revving a car engine, it just gets out of control and it can't relax and sit back. So having an orgasm regularly, going back to that, having
Yeah.
an orgasm regularly would actually just take you out of that fight or flight into that calm state. And so I think if we teach young girls about their periods and get them to honour their periods and pay attention to it, because our period tells us so much about our overall wellness. It's not just about fertility, as we've been led to believe, but
Yeah.
also tells you about your immune system, it tells you about your mood, it tells you about your bone health. It's so important, our period does. I must say, if you're on the pill, then obviously you're having an artificial period, so
Yeah.
that's not the same. But if you're not, and so I think if women could teach women, young women today about that, and how to listen to their bodies each month, each time they have a period. Is there anything that's different? Imbalance as well. And so as we transition to like 20s, a lot of women drink a lot of alcohol, smoke a lot, late nights. All of that is having an impact on their adrenal glands. And so when they get to perimenopause, they're just depleted all those hormones that are available to them. So I think it's to empower women is to start with young women and then empower them to pay attention to their hormones. Every period they have is their body talking to them. Is there something that's not right? What's changed? Okay, well, let's see what's happening. What is causing the stress? What am I doing in my life that's causing the stress? Every period that we have, particularly the perimenopausal years, is a window to what you're going to be like once you hit menopause. Are your energy levels depleted? And I think if we really take a hold of that as women, then we can teach our husbands, our sons, our
Yeah.
grandchildren. It just goes down the line how important after when you start your period on day one of your cycle, at that point, this is where your hormones, all of them are the lowest. So this is why it's almost like being postmenopause. You might feel a bit groggy, energy might be a bit depleted. And so it's really, really important to know yourself,
Yeah.
know yourself from the inside. And then we can teach our men so that, day 5 of my period or day 1 or 2 of my period, when I'm feeling rough and I really need to look after my adrenal glands here because my ovaries aren't working, they need a little bit of attention. Can you go and do the shopping, or can you pick the kids up at school, or can you make dinner, or can we get a takeout that we both really enjoy? Just literally take time to look after yourself just in that short period of time. Day 1, day 2, day 3, up to day 5, and then day 5 of your cycle, your estrogen and progesterone is climbing and your energy is coming up. And I think just the basics of that can make such a difference to a woman's life and to your relationship. And then when you get to that perimenopausal years and things aren't, as you once knew them, and then beyond that into postmenopause and beyond, it's about communicating, but understanding your hormones first and then inform the partner. Because I think it's this big mystery, isn't it?
It is, and I really think that it's not only just a mystery for us as women, but it's a mystery for our partners. It's a mystery. Men don't get it. They haven't got a clue, and all they know is they've got to keep out the way, or they're going to be on the backlash of whatever's going on. And if they just had a bit more, if they understood a bit more, and it would make their lives so much easier too. And it would, and I have this real thing about communication and relationships, because too many people, they don't really communicate. They don't connect with each other. They don't connect on a, it's all almost on a very surface, banal level. And so talking about something like this would seem almost alien. But if you have that real connection and you communicate at that deeper level, how wonderful is that you can actually talk to each other, you can get an understanding of what's going on for each other. And for the, for the man to, the partner, man, woman, whoever the partner is, to be able to understand a bit more and say, okay, I get it a bit more, and this is what we can do instead. How can we take care of each other? How can we take care of ourselves? How can I not feel excluded? It's all of that, because whilst we women can feel quite denigrated at times, there's also that little kind of collection of women where we get together and say, well, men don't get it, men don't understand, and then they feel excluded, and so therefore they're not going to enter this kind of this den of women who are not going to talk to them, and not, they don't get it themselves, but they're going to exclude their men too. I'm a great believer in communication and just bringing all this into the open much more.
I think, we're just getting men into the delivery room, aren't we? That's not been that long. I say it since a man is part of that. And,
Yeah.
obviously hypnobirthing is very, very hands-on, and man's involved, and
Mm,
understanding the different phases of childbirth. And, he has a role rather than just as a bystander.
mm.
And it's almost like the next step is to get our men involved in the perimenopause and the menopause, and beyond that, because like I said, we live without those hormones for quite
Yeah.
a long time, and and they have their menopause. They have theirs. It's much later on, but they do have theirs as well.
Okay. I think that's one for another conversation, Pamela, because I'd love to talk to you about that, because I think, again, it's not a subject that people are aware of. And it would be lovely if we could talk about that so that men get a better understanding, and their women do too.
Mm.
So, yeah, can we leave that for another time? Because I think that'd be a
Yeah,
whole new subject.
definitely.
It's been a really fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot of stuff, I have to say, and I hope the listeners have too. And thank you so much for talking to me today. Yeah, how can they get in touch with you? What is the best way that they can get in touch with you and find out more?
The best way to get in touch with me is to email me, really,
Okay.
or go to my website. You can find my details there as well. So my website is www.smarterchange.co.uk. That's smart, SMARTER, smarter, and
Yeah.
then change.co.uk.
Okay, that's great. So I will put the details in the show notes for anybody who's listening to repeat it again: www.smarterchange.co.uk. And I'll put the other links to getting in touch with you and how people can follow you and so on in the show notes, so that they'll know a bit more about you and find out more about all this fascinating stuff. I just want to say thank you yet again. It's been really fascinating. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you, Wendy.
I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, then please make a review. Rate this episode and put a review on iTunes. Details of how to do it are in the show notes. All the details about me are in the show notes, about my book, my website, and how to get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. Get in touch. And it's for now, it's just for me to say goodbye.